All right, what's up, everyone? This is Jason Tucker. This is WPwatercooler, episode number 288.
Oh, our pre-show, this is probably our best pre-show yet.
Oh yeah.
We just learned. We just did learning.
We did.
This is what you missed by not being on the show. You don't get the crazy tales as told and affirmed to be true by our very own cast of.
We're not going to name names.
Nope. We're going to keep that person innocent.
But it rhymes with Gus.
Definitely a male.
We're not going to name names, but his hair color is Russ.
I don't look kind of rusty. Maybe.
Wow. Oh, thank you. You made my day, man.
So speaking of which, we want to figure out why are they forking with WordPress, and we want to go around there real quick, get everyone introduced. George, tell us why they're forking around with WordPress.
Because it's just so lovable. My name's George Stefanos. I work for Automatic doing Jetpack shiny things, and I like building cool stuff. My life is cool and I do cool stuff. I'm doing it without cursing, I think. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, it's good to have you on, as always. Appreciate it. Cosper, how about you, man? How's it going?
Hey, I'm Jason Cosper, and I am the Senior Performance Engineer over at Liquid Web. Happy to be here today.
Man. Top of the morning to you.
Good to have you on. Russ, what about you, dude? How's it going?
Hey, what's up? I'm Russ. I formerly, I can't say that word. I used to work at Web Dev
Formerly.
I no longer work there. I'm freelancing as of now, but I have good things on the horizon. I do stuff with WordPress in Las Vegas, and I'm also a storyteller, as you heard
or didn't hear.
I'm an entrepreneur of sorts. Let's just say that.
Yes, he is.
Someone give him money so he can stop telling us these stories.
Right.
Awesome. Speaking of stories, Steve, what about you, dude?
I am Steve Zengen. I'm the founder of Zeek Interactive. I run the OC WordPress meetup. Say's on a plane today.
She's on a plane. And she threatened us that she was going to not only be on a plane, but that she was going to sit next to a Texan who really did not want to be on the internet. But it would have been fun to have her on and hang out with us here. I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me on Twitter at Jason Tucker. My website is jasontucker.blog. And I do a show here on WPwatercooler called WP Blab. Feel free to go take a look at that if you're into marketing and wanting to learn how to market your stuff using WordPress. All right.
So wait, is that like a remake of the Samuel L. Jackson movie Snakes on a Plane? Say's on a Plane?
Yes, Say's on a plane. That's a horror movie. Multiple say reads.
Could you imagine multiple says coming out of the overhead bin?
No, it's like that bad scene in Being John Malkovich. A bunch of says in a restaurant.
Now that we offended our dear friend Say. But let's talk a little bit about.
We love her.
So during our pre-show, we were discussing this idea of how WordPress itself started out as a fork. It started out as a fork, and it forked from a software called B2.
Mm-hmm.
And we were kind of talking about how that evolution went from way back in 2001 to now. And I'm reading the Codex because I can't remember my kids' phone numbers, so to try to remember a date that happened, way back when, no. So the idea that this started out as a fork itself, and how WordPress is looking to and has probably had a few forks throughout its lifetime. And one of the ones that we brought up last episode, or the episode before, was that we were talking about a software called Classic Press that came out, and how that whole thing was going down. If you want to go
shipped, or is it just vaporware?
I don't know. I'm not entirely sure, because after listening to the interview that happened over on Torque's website, you should definitely go take a look at that episode and just kind of listen to that over there.
Isn't the ship? Don't you just make a copy of 498 and change all the names to Classic Press and then put it on GitHub? Isn't that shipping?
But you realize how much effort it takes to change every instance of the phrase?
Find a replace.
Okay, sure. That's not going to break anything at all.
It won't mess up. It's all good. It's easy.
You just use the
It's beta. It's pre-alpha software.
You just use the WPCLI to replace everything. It's great.
And then make sure you rename WPCLI to something else after the fact.
To CPCLI.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that was one of the questions that was asked during that particular interview. And not to like go through this interview thing, we would do the same thing here. But the idea that, you know, would the namespace stay the same? Do you have to change that? If you change that, what happens? And then if you change that, how do you deal with looking for plugins? Are there going to be plugins? Is there a repository? It's a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of stuff involved in just kind of managing managing WordPress itself. It's not like it's one person that's running this thing. It literally takes an army, and it's a multinational army that needs to, you know, make this happen.
I mean, it's multiple volunteers who take time away from their families to build, and it's multiple companies that are financing this. I mean, like, you think about WordPress as a free software, but I mean, like, to let Shredder have the time to do a new release of WordPress, you know, that company pays his salary in order to do that. There's a lot of money that is invested to this. And just to think that, you know, because a new visual editor is coming, that the whole world's going to be set on fire is just crazy to me.
I mean, the thing is, you have to look at the history of forks with WordPress. It's not just that WordPress was a fork of V2 Cafe Log, but WordPress itself has had forks in the past, like a freaking decade ago when they were looking at getting multi-site stuff into WordPress. There was WordPress multi-site, which is what WordPress.com was based off of, which basically for every new subsite span up a new set of like 8 tables or whatever to store their posts and taxonomies and what have you. But there was another one that wanted to do it differently, kind of similar to how Tumblr manages their posts, where everything goes in one giant post table. And that was called Lyceum. That lasted in this last release was around 2008 and around 2010 when WordPress multi-site was actually merging into WordPress core. Lyceum finally said, yeah, we've not done anything in 2 years. We're just giving up on this. Have fun. So maintaining a fork, it's not just you need to make it, you need to maintain it going forward. And that is a big time commitment that not a lot of folks without a huge amount of backing can really put into.
Well, only if you want to be successful. Right?
Yes.
You don't have to do anything.
True.
I just
abandonware litters the web.
I just want to say that for the record, I think Post Table should be the podcast for post status. I think that'd be great. Post Table.
Definitely.
But so like what George is saying though, it's like there's an entire structure, and like it's more than just a couple files that live on a server that make things work. And that's a huge overhaul. Like, you know, I think we know a lot of people in the WordPress space, but I don't think people are just ready to jump ship because this new visual editor is coming. Like like you were saying, Jason, like that means, do we have to have a WordPress and a Classic Press version of Jetpack? George, would you guys even do that? Would you even consider that?
No, why would they?
You know, I mean, like, I understand. I completely understand the consensus of the community saying like it's something to worry about, but I'm not leaving. I love WordPress. It's what I built my career on. I'm not leaving.
It's not anything to worry about, right? So the premium plugin developers that are out there like ACF and Gravity Forms are not going to start creating ports for Classic Press. WP Engine and Liquid Web are not going to start hosting Classic Press, right? That's not how this works.
Yeah, it just becomes a series of PHP files that need to be hosted someplace, and that's it. They're not going to make a one-click install of Classic Press. Like, that's not going to happen.
And then in the end,
Casper had something to say.
Oh, no, not at all. I was going to interject that it's just kind of funny that, okay, look, George mentioned Lyceum. Lyceum forked in 2003. What version of WordPress was out in 2003? Was trying to dig through. Exactly. So the last time that WordPress was a much less complex product when Lyceum forked. Now we've got the REST API. We've got all of these components, and it seems like and it feels like that they're hopeful that they can port changes over as needed from WordPress core if REST API improvements are made, if things like that are made into Classic Press. But I mean, my concern is how sustainable is that long term? Although one should never underestimate people with a chip on their shoulder, and it seems like the developers.
Yeah, look at our politics.
Yeah, exactly. So, of course, WP Engine, Liquid Web, DreamHost. I mean, some of the players that have less expensive hosting might be able to quickly set up a one-click install with this. Will they right out of the gate? Probably not.
No.
And that's what's going to drive adoption, and that's what drove adoption of WordPress in the early days. I mean, the whole reason I even started with WordPress is because I was hosting at DreamHost, and DreamHost had a one-click installer. WordPress was so easy that it was a 5-minute install, but the fact that it took it down to like 3 button clicks.
It was a famous 5-minute install. Get it right.
Which it was not. It just sounded good.
I jokingly, I jokingly said to George that only if you want to be successful. But the truth of the matter is, Classic Press has nowhere near the size of the team that WordPress has on its development staff. And WordPress has a lot of moving parts, like Casper just said. There's a lot of different things that a lot of different teams are subject matter experts in, right? And they're constantly maintaining these things because web hosting is always changing, right? Things on the web are always changing, and WordPress has to respond to that because it is so ubiquitous.
I mean, take out the idea that like there's these two entities. It's the fact that like Jason said something earlier in the chat that, okay, we don't like WordPress because of Gutenberg, so we're going to create this thing called Classic Press, but then they're going to come out with their own version of whatever Gutenberg is. They'll call it Classicberg or whatever, and then people are going to want to jump ship because they're not going to want to do that, and then it's going to be another fork, and like, why don't we just fix the problem at hand and make Gutenberg all that it can be? That's probably an army motto. I'm probably stealing it from somebody. But
either that or just disable Gutenberg.
Yeah,
there's like a plugin. It takes 2 seconds to install it, and you're good to go. There's also a plugin that will install a thing that will make the old editor show up instead of Gutenberg. I mean,
that's sort of the whole drive behind Classic Press, right? Is the what's say called the Never Gutenbergers, right? I mean, that's how I took it. Right? I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if they're really just rallying against Gutenberg or because they feel that WordPress has become too big or what, right? But if it's really just they're railing against Gutenberg, install WordPress and disable it.
Or you know what?
And move on.
Install WordPress 4.9 and never upgrade to 5.0. Or don't upgrade to whatever major version drops support for the Classic Editor plugin. Because, I mean, heck, Core already backports all security fixes back to 3.7.
Right.
So, yeah, just keep using the old version, which is not a great idea, but it's better than using a fork that has dubious ownership and lineage. And as soon as a marketer comes along and wants to get in on Classic Press and thinks they can make a little bit of money on it, how much you want to bet adware and bloatware is going to slip into the back end of that?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Bet you $1 million.
Yep. The second that they go, oh crap, we need money to be able to make this thing work, and we can't sell. We're not selling this thing. I mean,
that's not a binding bet, by the way. We didn't shake.
I would definitely go put. I would put $10 on red. That's for sure.
So let's look at the other side, right? Let's see if we can put ourselves in their shoes for a minute and look at it from their perspective.
I don't wear Crocs. I am not going to wear.
That's just mean to people who wear Crocs.
I mean, those comfy shoes. Who wears those? All right, go on.
So let's put ourselves in their shoes for a moment and see if we can kind of talk about why they're doing this. What's the point in doing this? What are they upset about? What is their motivation for doing this?
There's change, and I don't like it.
All
Yeah,
right.
change
Get off my lawn.
is hard.
This is like the new Facebook. They're changing everything, moving things around. Get off my lawn. Give me the old one.
Right. I mean, I've heard people in our own Vegas community say that each release of WordPress has its own bugs, and it's not stable, reliable anymore. So we want to go back to the old ways of you could just hit update and things didn't break. But like as you said, Steve, the reality is that, you know, when Google releases an update, we have to adapt or die, and then that means that this plugin has to adapt or die, and like it's a whole ecosystem that has to change. And I feel like instead of just jumping on board, we're saying, how do we keep it here because I don't want to learn anymore?
Right. And so is WordPress supposed to just stay still? Right? Is it just supposed to stay as it is?
I love the fact that WordPress never does that, that we adapt, and, you know, like it might not be today, but in 48 hours, I'm going to have a new version of the Yoast SEO plugin, and it's going to adapt to schema, and I'm going to be ready to roll. Like, I love that about this community.
And so let me give you a different example. Let's compare WordPress to Apple, right? And hear me out for a second, right? Here's how I feel about Apple. I feel that about every other year it's a cycle. So every 2 years they make improvements, or they come out with something new, or they really put an overhaul on their software, and then the next year they spend just making it stable. Right? At least that's the pattern I've seen in Apple. I don't know if that's exactly accurate, but I like the stable years. I like those years where they take the stuff that is not working and they make it work without putting a lot of improvements in it. I'd like to see some of the versions of WordPress do that. Now, you could argue that security patches and the .xx releases do that, but I think stability and fixing bugs should be as much of an effort as UI improvements. I'm off my soapbox.
No, I agree with you, Steve. With Apple has this. It's not something that they publicize, obviously, because they don't tell anybody anything. But it's this whole TikTok model where on the tick year you have this thing going on, and they actually put out new features and stuff. On the talk year, which is like the expression with iPhone.
We're in a talk year right now.
Yeah, and that's when the S version of the hardware comes out, and you have all these new features that are kind of refinements of things that have came out in the previous year. So it makes sense to do that.
Forget the iPhone for a second. I'm really just talking about the operating system. I'm talking about software.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, especially now, they've said this, especially with Apple, as they said, we are going to have it so that we're going to take a year to really kind of get our stuff together for that hardware.
Look at Sierra and then High Sierra. I mean, that's exactly what they did.
Yep.
You have a TikTok release exactly like that they're going to push and make things as stable as possible.
I guess the thing is that you want to have developers that are working towards. So the developers working towards getting Gutenberg ready to launch. They make this into a plugin, so you can use the plugin and play with the plugin and be able to see how this works. It's almost like beta testing without having to push it straight into core. Give it some time for people. I mean, WordPress is doing this. Like, they're doing this already. They're already making it so that it's a plugin that you can play with first. Really get your stuff figured out, and then they'll just roll it into core, and now you have that in core.
And so it sort of leads into my thinking here is one of the comments that came from a guest that was supposed to be on this show is part of his motivation is that he's afraid to update WordPress, right? He's afraid to click that update button because it crashes the system. And I'm paraphrasing, right? I don't know if that's exactly what happens, right?
Sure.
I hear that from some of my clients as well.
I hear it constantly.
That's not WordPress, in my experience, right? That very rarely is that WordPress core that's causing that.
I would argue the same thing. It's not WordPress core. You have an old version of a plugin, or you didn't update the table right, or you're using a hook wrong. You're doing something, but like if you, again, the basic debugging of WordPress, deactivate all your plugins, change to a 20-something theme, and then update. And if everything works, it's not core. It's something that's an add-on, that's an addition to WordPress. And I make that argument to this day.
It's just
But
like
all that stuff's work.
if my iPhone starts crashing, most likely it's a crappy app that I've installed on my iPhone that's causing that, or something that I've done, right? Some software change that I've made.
Yeah. I guess the thing is with WordPress is that the software, the add-on, the plugins that get installed, the themes that get installed aren't in a sandboxed state. There isn't like an API that connects these two pieces together to figure out whether or not things are working correctly or not. Like WordPress is not like diligent in figuring out whether or not this particular plugin is the thing that's breaking. I mean, PHP will throw up a red flag and go like, dude, this thing's broken, error on line, blah, 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 and that's it. So I guess if you're not experienced with how WordPress works, that you're probably going to end up having this type of issue of not being able to debug it.
But let's be frank, and I'm going to say this because Say's not on the line.
I'm going to be Sally, but you can.
No, don't be Frank. Steve, okay? We like.
All right, I'm gonna be Steve. Nobody likes Steve, but I'm gonna be Steve for a minute. All right. That's not WordPress's responsibility, right? That's the responsibility of whoever's creating that third-party piece of technology, right?
Yep.
And those third parties are all on different development schedules, right? All the premium plugins, all the theme developers, they're all on different development schedules. And WordPress revs come out fast. So if you're not on top of it, you can cause these white screen errors. You can cause WordPress to not be updatable. I remember a couple versions back of Visual Composer that was doing exactly that. It wasn't updated at the right frequency, and the latest version of WordPress, it was literally just crashing because Visual Composer was installed.
Yeah, I mean the web hosts are the ones that are doing the majority of the updates. And if you have a good web host and the web host is diligent in running a test to see if your website's working currently, doing an update, running another test, and then coming back and saying, hey, we went onto your website, maybe we went on a couple pages. I don't know how this stuff works. I don't work at a web host, but all those things kind of happen. And then, we just sent you an email letting you know that we updated the security patches. You're good.
If your host doesn't do this, you can look at systems like Ghost Inspector. Ghost Inspector will do this for you, where if you make a change, it'll actually go through any pages that you've dictated, and it'll say a certain percentage of this page has changed, so we're sending you an alert.
I mean, yep. I just want to add on top that like there are hosting companies out there that will give you a sandbox to go play in. Mm-hmm. Like you don't have to break your live site. You can go.
It has all the stuff.
Yeah, like you just have to invest a little bit more money, and then if you invest it today, you're not gonna invest it. Okay, listen, here's the reality, all right, is I have seen people that have come to our company and been like, I haven't updated Yoast since 2.09, and we're on 8.1 or something like that. Like, there are people out there that are just not hitting it, and I don't know if it's lack of knowledge, if it's worry a bit about, like, updating, but, like, you should be on some kind of host, Liquid Web, WP Engine, something that just says, here's the sandbox. Please go break it 1,000,000 times, but at least you know what to expect, and here's what's going to happen.
Yeah. One of the things I want to give a quick shout out to WooCommerce, because one of the pages I love in WooCommerce is the status check. There's a status check that'll tell you exactly what's going on and which templates are not compatible with your current version of WooCommerce.
It usually tells you what version of WooCommerce the template came from, so you know when to go and look. Like, yes.
Stuff like that is awesome.
But I mean, to a point here, it's like I feel like we're complaining that WordPress is this easy to thing, and like I sign up for a WordPress site, and then now it's hard. Like there are people like George and Jason and myself who are building in these features to help you solve your problems. And it's like, if we're not going to use these tools, then what's the point here? I feel like if George doesn't have to build this compatibility check, like the talent this guy has who could build something insane, but we're helping you here. Update your software. Click the button. I promise it's not going to break. And you know what? I had a Jetpack issue on my site recently, and you know what it was? I moved from staging to production, and the blog ID was what made my stats and Jetpack go away.
It sounds like a YP, dude.
I reached out on the forums. I had somebody say, "Hey, I fixed it for you. It was solved in about an hour." So, like, you, regardless what your issue is, there's somebody who can help you, and we can resolve this for you. You shouldn't have this fear that it's going to break because WordPress has a new version coming out.
But anyway, back to our actual issue.
Good job, George.
Actually, I think we should spend the last 5 minutes talking about sporking.
Yeah, so about 5 years ago, Morten Rand Hendrickson had a post about 10 years in, is it time to fork WordPress? Saying, like, we can do like an enterprise WordPress fork versus just a blogging WordPress fork and whatnot. And I think the beauty of the way WordPress is architected is they would not really necessitate any core changes. I always liked the way that Magento ran their CMS software with the community and the enterprise edition. The only real difference between the community edition and the enterprise edition, the enterprise edition had a bunch of extra modules included with it that are auto-activated by default. So if someone really wanted to have their own edition of WordPress, all you need to do is slipstream a directory into the WP content MU plugins folder, and it would get auto-loaded, and you'd have all the extra customizations running, taking stuff out, putting stuff in, doing whatever you need to, without messing with core's ability to update itself and grow in the future.
When does that come out in Jetpack?
To invoke Morten one more time, I believe, didn't he just have a post on doing treating 4.9 as kind of long-term support, like a long-term support branch? I mean, that's kind of what we've been doing back to 3.7.
Yeah.
I mean, still there's security updates, there's everything like that. So all these people who are just like, I really don't want Gutenberg, boo, like wailing and gnashing their teeth.
How's it sound again?
I don't want Gutenberg.
Gutenberg turned me into a nude.
If you're listening to the podcast version of this on Spotify or Google Play, please watch this on YouTube for a minute. Just watch Cosper's face.
I love it. Oh, it's great.
So once they change their diaper, they can stay on 4.9. They can stay on. The fact that we still have security updates back to 3.7 shows that they can probably stay on 4.9 safely for years if they really don't want Gutenberg. And yeah, I mean, that's just all there is to it. Like, why bother with a fork? Why bother with this extra effort and backports and security updates and maintaining your own fork and abandoning it probably a few years later? Not to talk shit, but I'm talking shit. I'm sorry. Yeah, and I mean, prove me wrong, but
I mean, just this year, we finally got rid of the idea of, you know, supporting up to PHP 5.2. I mean, until 2018, you could still run that old version to support what you're saying, Cosper. Like, you could theoretically stay on this version, not introduce Gutenberg, not get some updates, and you could support this. I've seen some systems do it, but I'm going to highly advise that you don't do that. Just it's going to cause problems down the road.
I agree. Update, just get used to the new way of living. But if you really just can't and you're gonna wet the bed over it, then please just stay on 4.9. Don't bother with a fork. It's really come on.
Who wants to do that fine replace of all the WPs in there to be something else? Yeah.
How many
Command line. Just command line.
Yeah, just run some grep, run some awk.
I feel like when you go to like a restaurant, they have like how many gumballs are in this thing, and like you make a count. Like, we could do that with WordPress. How many WPs?
How many WPs are in the code?
Yeah,
100,000.
That would be
really drunk if that was a drinking game.
That would be a fun WordCamp US that should come to WordCamp Orange County. I'm just saying, that would be a fun game.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
With that said, it's now the end of our show. I want to say thank you very much for all of you fine folks for being on the show, as well as all you fine folks for watching at home. I really appreciate it. like Russ said, we both have this as a video format as well as an audio format. So if you want to listen to the show, you can definitely listen to it, or you can watch it over on YouTube. Find us. We're all over the place on all the different podcast players that are out there. I used to say podcatchers, and then it made Steve cringe. So yeah, make sure you guys take a look at any of those things. Talk to y'all later. Go to our website, WPwatercooler.com/subscribe, where you can find all the links to subscribe to the show. Talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.
In the meantime, go fork yourself.